And the goal really in this session is to be much more interactive than we've been before. We've got 50 minutes. I'm going to give you 20 minutes at the end to ask questions. But if you actually want to jump in at any point, if you're thinking we're talking absolute nonsense, please jump in with questions. What we're going to be talking about is a really, actually, I think a very interesting subject, which is the extended workforce, building a hybrid business organization with freelancers. So the focus will be on the freelance workforce. First of all, we have Fabio Rosati, the chief executive of Elance.
How are you?
Fabio, I'm well, thank you. Now, Roger Friedman, the president of the Motley Fool blog network.
Thank you.
Cheers. And Sara Horowitz, the founder and executive director of the Freelancers Union.
Hi.
Sara, hi. I wanted to start off with the question of why should organizations employ freelancers? Starting with Fabio. Why do it in the first place?
Well, it's really simply, you can't have all the smart people in your organization. It's a folly to think you have the best people in the world. You have to reach out beyond the boundaries of your team. And today, with 1/3 of the American workforce fending for themselves, working independently, if you don't have a strategy to reach out to the freelance community and engage them and take advantage of their amazing skills, you're making your company less competitive.
So you're saying that all companies, if they're going to thrive in this very disruptive world that we're living in, need a strategy to reach out to freelance workers. They need to have a list of freelance workers or a sense of who those freelance workers are. Absolutely. And a sense of how to get hold of them.
Absolutely. You have to envision your workforce as a combination of core employees and extended collaborators and partners who have the skills that you need, who are highly specialized, and you can access and make available to your team, to your employees, when they need that extra help, when they need that specialized help.
So that's changing the role of the HR professional quite significantly. Instead of being the inward-looking person who's always looking at the core of the organization and how to manage it, you're looking outside.
It's a great insight. I think that the perception that HR is all about managing your internal resources is evolving. HR now is about managing your entire workforce and recognizing that most companies, especially modern companies, are increasingly a hybrid combination of employees and non-employees. So now you're starting to think about, how do I get really, really good at managing the extended workforce? How do I get really, really good at recruiting and engaging the best outside talent when I need them? How do I treat that talent? How do I measure that talent? How do I communicate with that talent?
So that's calling for a new set of competencies on the part of HR people. I mean, a whole new world that they've got to be looking at. Roger, tell me, is this right? Do we actually really have this sort of future? Do we need to be looking for all these freelancers, or is he just trying to sell his company business?
Well, I would say that our HR department loves our freelance network, because right now everyone looks great on a resume or a cover letter.
Right.
They look great in a suit for the interview. They're on their best behavior, but you don't know what you're getting. You're getting married on the first date, maybe a second date if the interviews go well. With our freelance network at the Motley Fool, people are coming to us. They're showing their ability to make a cogent argument. They are making a commitment to us, and they're proving themselves. So we have probably 400 people who apply for every opening that we have at the Motley Fool. And this is the freelance network that we've created. Gives them a great way to know who is going to be a great employee for us. So HR loves what we're doing.
So, but is being part of this freelance network just a way of becoming a core employee?
If you want. We find there are different motivations for it. Some people want to have a full-time freelance job where they're in their pajamas all day, and that's perfectly fine with us. There are some people who want to join our core team in-house. And there are a whole lot of people who are math teachers or headhunters or helicopter pilots who just love investing, and they like to be able to have a voice and to share their ideas with us and with the world.
So Sara, is this the future of business, these core companies with a large peripheral network around them? Is this the way the economy is going? And what forces do you see driving this this economic change, if indeed it is happening?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the future is already here. So I think we're already starting to see this. And we used to think about this emerging freelance workforce, but what I think we're also seeing is the traditional workforce is working like this. It's just shorter term duration. And I think we really are seeing just an incredible flexibility due to a bunch of different things, obviously from globalization of workforces, decline of the union movement, and a lot of other factors. And I would just say that, there used to be kind of an old debate in the 90s, is this good, is this bad? And I think parts of the world, like Europe, I think are still a little bit stuck in that debate. But I think it's very much now more about how do we make freelancing fair? How do we make it so that because the income's so episodic, we can really stabilize it? And it's very much like the conversation we had in the New Deal, because those companies in the 30s needed flexibility, and we gave it to them in the form of unemployment insurance. We just balanced the risks much more widely than we're doing right now.
But this is the new economy, you're saying, because of the need for flexibility, because of global supply chains and the rest of it?
For sure.
Absolutely. Now, the second issue, and again, I'm going to go back to Fabio, is I want to talk about is how do you manage freelancers? How do you get hold of them? How do you integrate them with the rest, with the core workers? And how do you bring them into the company culture? It's a huge management problem for HR professionals, is it not?
It is, and I'm only going to focus on an aspect of it. I think our other panelists can really talk about other dimensions. It's a multidimensional challenge and opportunity. The first thing that companies need is the right set of tools and the right vision. The simplest analogy that I can make is that today it's possible to engage and manage your freelance network as you manage your friends on a social network. You have to have the right platform. We call it the private talent cloud. It's a way to engage your community and communicate with your community as easily as you do your network, with your network of friends. You can find who's available. You can find who is interested in the work. You can collaborate, give feedback. And the freelancer that is connected to your organization has complete visibility of the work that is coming their way, can plan around it, can make themselves available, can ask for feedback, which is really important, and has certainty about getting paid on time. So we have, first and foremost, to recognize that the tools that are available typically are not adequate. That's why we look at new technology. And our company, Elance, has been investing in building a new platform to make that possible. But that's not enough. You also have to have management philosophies and the right way to think about your freelance workforce. And for that, I would love Roger and Sara to comment on the question as well.
But tell me, are there any particular examples that you could point to of companies that are good at the freelance business, are good at bringing in freelancers?
Oh, absolutely. There's some unbelievable companies that do this super well. One, of course, is the Motley Fool, and Roger will talk about what he's doing. But there are many more. One that comes to mind on the West Coast is Mozilla. Mozilla is a fantastic organization, has amazing human resource policies, just like the Motley Fool, by the way, one of the top places to work for the employees. So tremendous respect for the employee, tremendous recognition that having the best talent in-house is really important, and yet a lot of respect for people that can contribute to that team as independents. So Mozilla has a network of open source developers. They're constantly helping build the best possible products from anywhere they may be based, anywhere in the United States, anywhere in the world. They're really innovative brands, and one of the top brands in the United States is using this model very successfully for a lot of their creative work. So they started with an internal creative team, then they managed a lot of agencies, and then they realized that working through agencies wasn't very effective or not as effective as they wanted, and they started to recognize that the agency really typically was just hiring those freelancers and managing those freelancers in the middle and kind of getting in the way. So they built a model and an organization to be able to go directly to the freelancers that were doing the work and connecting employees to the freelancers, and they're getting fantastic results. They're cutting the time to hire in more than half. They're reducing costs because there's not a lot of intermediation. And most of all, they're getting better results because the communication and the creativity two-way between the designer or the writer or the researcher and the person that is leading the project is immediate. There's no filtering. Really interesting transformation.
And in terms of integrating freelancers into the workforce, what does this mean for HR professionals? How does this change their job? So they're looking outwards as well as inwards. What else are they doing?
I think that there is, a lot depends on the company's philosophy, but I think the number one conversation that has to happen in bigger organization is a discussion between HR and procurement. Okay. Traditionally, the extended workforce has been managed by procurement, because the argument was that we're hiring vendors, we're hiring staffing firms and agencies, right. So we need rate cards and contracts and competitive bidding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which turns the whole conversation in a very impersonal and hands-off relationship. You're treating your external workforce as vendors. When you look at building your extended workforce of freelancers, it's very different. You can't treat a freelancer like a vendor. It's a member of your team as a partner, and that becomes an HR conversation. And some of the companies that are doing this best, as a matter of fact, have HR and procurement working together to solve the problem. The other thing that needs to happen, that it's dramatically different, there has to be a desire to open the floodgates to the external workforce instead of closing them. Okay. A lot of companies are so worried about compliance, rightly so. They're so worried about classification. They're so worried about intellectual property, non-disclosure when you hire a freelancer. All of those things make perfect sense, but the problem with putting too many barriers is that the employee is no longer willing or able to go out and work with the really fantastic designer with a great idea at the right time. So the HR community has to say, this is too important to get too much bureaucracy in the middle. We have to find a way to make this model work. And the companies that are working on it are being successful at it.
Now, Roger, you have all the answers at Motley Fool. What are they?
So it's interesting because we had our first post in November of 2011, and since then I was a skeptic going in. I didn't think there was a huge body of people who were just waiting for an opportunity and a platform to share their investing advice. Less than 2 years, we have nearly 10,000 people who have raised their hand to say, I'd like to participate. I'd like to be in your blog network. I would like to write my articles and have the world see them. As you might guess, it's a bit of a management challenge. I can't handhold 10,000 people I've never met. But we did a couple of things. First of all, we wanted to make sure that we were focusing on the right ones. The tendency is to give about 80% of your feedback to the bottom 20% of performers, because they're the problem children. They're the ones you have to scold and to go back and forth on editorial with, and they suck up a lot of time. So we decided to turn that equation around, and let's cut ties with those who aren't going to make it. Let's not spend a lot of time taking the 2s to 5s, and that's just not the best use of our time. It's a much better use of our time if we can take these 6s, 7s, and 8s and make them our A players. And I will say that in less than 2 years, we've had 37 people join us as contract writers or in-house fools, which is what we call our employees. It's a good thing.
And what's their incentive? I mean, money, prizes?
All over the place. There is some, as you guys talked about in an earlier panel, some gamification that we want to do. A lot of it is ego-driven, and we need to do a better job on that with badges and. But editor's choice. It's a small icon that goes along with the choices that are the articles that we think exemplify what we're trying to do. It doesn't cost us anything. It's somewhat arbitrary based on the editor who reads it and the time of day he happens to read it, whether he has a hangover or not. But we have a Facebook group for our core participants, and the elation that people get, and they share it with all their other freelance friends that I got an editor's choice, my first, and it makes me wonder sometimes why we paid them. But many are motivated by the money, and we try to pay a nice wage. People can make a living doing what they're doing with us. Some people the motivations are all over the place. So if we pay $50 per syndicated article, and for a graduate student, that's a weekend of beer and pizza. So that's a big deal. For a hedge fund guy, that might cover parking for the day. So we have to understand that the hedge fund guy is looking for prospective clients, or he has a different motivation than the kid who's putting together his own, his first portfolio.
And how do you guard against conflict of interest?
We have disclosure policies. We have, you aren't allowed to trade within a certain window. You have to disclose what ownership stake you have in any company that you've mentioned. It's not perfect. I'm sure that people are breaking the rules, but we also have limits on, you can't write about a company that has less than $1 share price, less than $200 million market cap. Basically, we try to keep it so, to keep people writing about companies that they can't move the market. We're not market movers. That's not our goal. We actually, a couple months ago, wrote a fairly lengthy expose about penny stock scam artists. A couple of them had been paid to put stuff on our site. Fortunately, we found them before anything went out, and we cut those bloggers off instantly and told all of our competitors. But when I started with the blog network, when we got it going, I was afraid that, first of all, people were going to type rants in all caps, and that people were going to have nefarious motives. And it turns out that I underestimated people. There are some all-cap ranters. They're fun, interesting. But most of the people out there want to share their investing thinking with other people. Our mission is to help the world invest better. And we find that, that the bloggers who we like, who stick with us, really embrace that mission.
Sara, I'd like to ask the same question to you, but really to look at it from the point of view of the freelancer. What does the freelancer need from the HR professional, from the company, in order to be integrated into the company, in order to get into their job properly?
Well, they actually need to get paid, which would really be helpful. And you know, one of the very biggest problems for freelancers is they do work and then they don't get paid. And you'd be surprised, but that really is one of the top 3 problems, or they get paid really, really late. And so HR procurement and perhaps, you know, finance or something. And I think one of the things that is really raised here is that it's very difficult for many freelancers to earn a living in these kinds of environments, when maybe they can do it as graduate students, and that's great. But I think the real challenge is going to be, because we of course are concerned with maintaining a middle class, that we have this workforce be one that is robust, that can pay taxes and really can, you know, contribute to the economic development. And I think we're seeing that, but I think increasingly people can feel the challenge. And it's not surprising. I mean, we have the worst distribution of income that we've had in the last 100 years. So I think that with freelancing, it's nimble, it's flexible, it's crucial, but I think we very much have to start looking at different kinds of business models. And I think one of the big trends that's going to be very interesting is sort of going back to some of the history of like the United Artists, that a lot of groups are going to start coming together to be interconnected, to start not just getting paid for their work, but maybe perhaps being owners, sort of, I think maybe cooperatives 2.0. I don't think it's going to be the old institutions, but I think when you look at crowdsourcing, Kickstarter, I think we're going to see a lot of interesting new organizations whose mission and goal will be production of content and other things, but really to make sure that there's more income for them.
Yeah, I just want to ask you, I mean, isn't this the Marxist nightmare? Isn't this just the casualization of the workforce? Isn't it just grinding the faces of the poor so that the rich can make more money? Isn't this whole freelance economy really rather worrying?
Well, you know, I don't really buy that, because I think that every time the nature of business changes, labor has to adapt. And every time labor has to adapt, it's always sort of a nostalgic position that the thing that came before was better. And I really do think that in the spirit of our democracies, we have to come together and come up with solutions. And I think there are unique issues that are sometimes challenges and sometimes opportunities, but that's the role in a democratic society for us to come back and say, we've got to make it so that freelancing is fair. We have to update these old, archaic laws and regulations that fit another era.
But aren't we just seeing the casualization of the knowledge worker in the same way that we see in the casualization of the manual worker? Isn't the middle class just being destroyed by this new economy?
I think it's more complicated than that, but I think for some, for sure, I've spent the last year going around the country talking to freelancers and really hear for the first time a very strong consciousness of what's happening. I remember we were together on a panel and other people feeling like in other countries there are workers who are willing to work for less. And I don't think it's a simple answer to say let's just put up some national boundaries, but I think we do need to start to see that it can be a challenge. I think knowledge workers in developed countries probably have advantages because of education and the wealth of those countries. But I think we're going to start seeing these changes for sure.
Fabio, I'm now wearing my Marxist hat. Can you respond as a filthy capitalist?
It's good. I'm glad that you're challenging us with the questions. If you think about what this is, the freelance movement, it's really about empowerment. It's really about taking charge. And the vast majority of the people that we serve and that we work with wants that, is really committed to it. So Sara is absolutely right. It's something that we have to figure out how to make work. As with every innovation in the workforce, during the Industrial Revolution or the Information Revolution, people have had to figure out how to make those changes work. We're not going to stop this change. Businesses want it, individuals want it, technology is forcing it. It's a little bit like commerce and e-commerce. When commerce started to move online, all kinds of new things had to be figured out. Trust, now taxes, sales taxes, all kinds of things have to happen when you introduce massive change. For sure, there are imperfections in the model that need to be sorted out, but people want it, and it's about individual empowerment.
Why do people want it? Why do people want it?
Go ahead, Ron.
I got an email this morning from one of our contributors, a guy named William. He worked as a security guard at a now-defunct coal mine in West Virginia. Not a great economy. He wanted to, once again, he's the most earnest man I've ever met. I never met him, but he wanted to thank us once again for the opportunity to stay in the area he loves and follow his passion. So I don't think he's being in any way marginalized. I think he's making a living working on the projects he wants to work on from the place he wants to work on. And I think in that, it's a cliche, but it's a win-win situation.
So in response to my Marxist rant, you're actually saying that we're handing power to the workers so they can live where they want to and do what they want to.
We're creating opportunity.
And I would say also freelancers are really talking about a new way of living. They really want a different life. They don't want to be stuck in a 40-hour work week where you used to be paid well and you used to have benefits. If that's not on the table, it's not as compelling as it used to be. And that's why I think freelancers are putting together a different life, and these are the tools that are there. And I think what I would like to say is that we should do more. We can do more.
Now, I want to move on to a new question, which is how do freelancers live and thrive in this economy? What do they need to do to thrive? And as a subordinate to that question, I want to know, how do they keep their skills alive? I rely on my company insofar as I've got any skills to steer me into improving. How do they remain employable and successful in this freelance economy? And Fabio, let's start with you.
Okay. The issue of employability, as Sara well knows, is on top of my mind all the time. I believe that every one of us in our profession is constantly challenged by staying current. I can be a doctor and have new medicine, new tools, new technologies to deal with. I could be a nurse. I could be a designer suddenly moving from print medium to graphic to web to mobile. If I'm a software developer, the worst thing that I can do is to learn one software programming and just stick with it for the rest of my life, thinking that it's always going to be current, when the fact of the matter is there's always going to be an Android or an HTML or something new. So for our workforce and for all of us, whether we're parents or politicians, how do we focus on employability and make that possible? What we love about the freelance movement is that freelancers get this. They understand that unless they're employable, they don't get to work. They don't have a market for their skills. So they've got big
incentives.
They're very big incentives. So the type of people that operate in the freelance economy are either people who have day jobs and maybe they're working for a bank, and the bank hasn't upgraded their systems for a long time, so they're collecting the paycheck, they're doing their maintenance work on this big infrastructure, but they really want to learn the next few skills so that they can change job in a year or two, or they can maybe start a little business on the side. That's fantastic that that's possible. Or there are people who are doing other things that are the bookends of our economy. They're students, they're retirees, they work in New Hampshire, they want to adjust their lifestyle, but now they can connect with a company in New York and San Francisco and do really meaningful work a few hours a day online. So all of these are really positive things. As long as you have access to good data, you have an understanding of the job market and you can learn the new skills. So just to finish up my comment, yesterday we announced the release of a new version of Elance University, a section of Elance that we've created for our community, where we basically pull together trends on jobs. So you can go and look at all of the skills that are in demand, and you can see whether your skills are growing or declining, or what the average hourly pay is for all of the different skills in our community. And we have over 400 skills. And we've had that for a while, but we then layered it with access to over 20,000 online courses. We partnered with a company here in New York called Skilled Up, which pulls together in a Google-like environment where you search the skill, all the online courses that are available, so our community can say, oh, this skill is really hot. I want to get really good at it. Voila, I can find all the classes that are available online, free, paid, study. And then we partner with another company called Smarter, which provides online tests. We have several hundred online tests that we've been offering our community. And what's awesome is that I can look at job trends, I can learn the skills, I can test myself, and when I reach a level of proficiency, we pull those credentials onto your profile, and voila, now you have access to those jobs. That's fantastic and transformational. That's a new way to think about your work. And it's very hard to do that within the confine of an organization. That's why the freelance economy is so fascinating. It's very vibrant. There's always opportunity for experimenting.
Coming from the other side, it's a great benefit for us if we can develop our people, the freelancers who are writing for us. So recently we asked all of our freelancers to become experts in a particular field, to focus on a sector rather than being generalists. And we're giving them tools so they can learn more about 3D printing or how you write about these companies as an investment. We're working with our top freelancers to develop them into the kind of writers that we want them to be. So they meet our standards, they recognize our voice, they do our due diligence, and that they are good representatives of the Motley Fool brand. So it's training them is a benefit for us and for them because they're learning.
And from their point of view, how would a freelancer go about, say, managing workflow, making sure, from my limited experience of doing freelance work, there's either too much of it or not enough. How do you make sure that you can spread it out over the years, or the months, or the days?
So from the business perspective, we have had to put caps in place on people. There is the incentive to go and write as many articles as you can, because if you turn one in and it gets published, you get money 2 days later thanks to Elance. We sometimes need to put the brakes on them. We find that we treat them as partners, and we work with them to figure out the right pace for them. So we want them to be able to earn a living with us. We want them to be able to share all of their best ideas with us and not go to our competitors. We want them to have a great experience every step of the way. And I guess how they actually make that happen, what hours they work, is probably a better question for you.
So tell me about this, Sara, and put some emphasis on what it is that you as a union can do to make lives better for freelance workers.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the major things of how freelancers often get work is through their own networks. And they are exchanging information. That's also how they're getting the skills. So Freelancers Union brings people together. So we have a whole educational series that enables people not only to come and talk about whatever the issue is, but to start to network with one another. And really starting to think about ways that people can start to rely and build together these kinds of things. So for us, the our blog, trying to really have freelancers learn from one another and have a lot of peer-to-peer education. And I agree with you. I think the episodic nature of work can be a killer for people. And a great example where unemployment is, of course, geared for W-2 employees. Freelancers are not eligible for unemployment insurance. And if there are any freelancers here in the audience, they will tell you unemployment happens during the course of a year. And that this is just something that you prepare for and learn how to manage. And that's another thing is we have health insurance, retirement, because we're trying to make it so that we can take the risk out of freelancing for people.
I'd like to move now. We've got 20 minutes left. I'd like to move to questions. First of all, I'm going to ask the gentleman here.
Luis Solis from Imaginatic. First, Sara, thank you for what you do. Yeah. It is unbelievable, fantastic work.
Yeah, thank you.
Does freelancing favor an introvert, an extrovert, or is it Myers-Briggs neutral?
Great question. Fantastic question.
I think that's, first of all, a fabulous question. I think if you're an extrovert, it means you're really good at marketing yourself and getting work, agnostic as to the quality of the work maybe that you do. And I think one of the things that you do if you're not really good at, let's say, getting the work is you start to partner with other people. The freelancers I'm the most impressed with are the ones that sort of create their own kind of outsourcing agency. So in other words, I'm great as a graphic designer at getting that work. I'll get that gig and farm it out to somebody else and develop actually very interesting, complex relationships.
Do you see sort of little companies emerging, as it were, groups of people who collaborate?
Yeah, all the time.
Teams. Yeah.
Teams.
Yeah.
So that.
It's absolutely right.
And if you're worried about the writing process and how that might affect an extrovert, we actually have several of those who go to Starbucks and do the writing there.
But order decaf.
Let's go there and then there. Yep. Here.
Thank you. Cathy Bennett-Sattler from the United Nations Development Programme. I'm just loving this because I come from an organisation where half of our workforce is made up by so-called service contractors. And many of our member states complain about this because it's a hidden workforce. But in essence, they're freelancers. And not everybody wants to be part of the organised system, as it were. At the same time, I'd like to hear from you of how it works at the Motley Fool, especially in terms of how great is that as a talent source of people that you actually include in your core workforce?
It's incredible. We started it for two reasons. One, we wanted to give a voice to the individual investor. Two, we wanted more articles out there. Our business model is we write articles, they go to our portal partners and to our site. People read them, love them, give us an email address in exchange for a free report. We market to you, you give us your credit card. And that's not going to go out on the video, right? So those were two very clear goals that we wanted to meet, and we knocked those out of the park. We did not anticipate becoming the primary pipeline for our analysts and our writing and our editorial teams. It's been stunning, the quality that people are contributing to us, and it's been, I feel very protective of our 10,000 contributors now because they have so far outdone anybody's expectations. At first, our CEO wanted it to be a very clearly separate part of our company. We don't want it to damage the brand. Let's give it a different name. Let's have it, the articles look different. About a month ago, we integrated, so less than 2 years, we integrated our blog network with our regular Fool.com articles because the quality matched up. Everyone felt comfortable with it. So in addition to providing all the great content, it's now the primary pipeline for our in-house staff as well. So I don't know if that answers your question. I am truly inspired by this. My expectations, I went into this, I was wondering why they tapped me on the shoulder to start the blog network. I'm a newspaper guy, and everything should have 3 levels of editorial control before it sees the light of day. So why do you want me to do this? But I've just been amazed.
There's an established magazine called The New Republic, and the editor, former editor Mike Kinsley, said that he used to get so many letters from a particular pestilential figure who'd send a letter every week, and they were very good letters, so he had to publish them. They eventually gave this guy a job, and the guy is now one of the most well-known conservative journalists in the country. So it's an old model of dealing with compulsive writers. Yeah.
Hi, JP Soltes with GE. 2 questions. The first is, the unemployment rate is still elevated. Any indications that this might be cyclical? The unemployment rate being high, driven by large companies not hiring, right? Smaller, mid-sized companies are doing their share of hiring. When large companies start hiring again, do you think a lot of the freelancers will go back? And then number 2, universal health care coming in, do you think that actually helps the freelancers' case because they don't need to work for the larger companies to then tackle that large expense?
Good question.
I actually have been writing a bit about this. I actually think the unemployment numbers are really wrong, because I think that when you go back and you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics underlying question, the first question is, do you work for a business or on a farm? And and it just goes downhill from there. Not that working on a farm is bad at all, but I think that what we're seeing is that this really is part of it. I think many more people are working than we think. I don't think they're working a 40-hour work week. And I think that we really are seeing this is something very permanent, and it isn't going away.
I'd like to add a couple of things. First of all, the way to think about this transition, this work is not work that doesn't exist today. A lot of it is going through agencies. So you're basically working as a temp for an agency or a freelancer for an agency. From GE's perspective, for example, you're probably spending all this money anyway. What's happening now is that you're able to go directly to the person. And so the opportunity is to create a direct connection between the individual that is doing the work and your organization. And both sides gain tremendously. The agency in the middle a little bit less, of course, but both sides gain a lot. The other piece that is additive to the economy is what we call fractional work. There is a lot of work that would not be done otherwise, meaning that no one, especially in small companies, has enough work to hire a full-time graphic designer. Which small company can afford to hire a full-time graphic designer? In some cases, a full-time software developer. None. Most of these companies, though, would like some work being done and will be happy to hire somebody 5-10 hours a week. And now technology is making that possible. Just like now you can go to iTunes and buy a song for the first time, or you can buy a book on your Kindle for the first time. That ease of commerce is starting to migrate to work and is really benefiting the freelance economy. So the combination of migrating existing spend, we're talking about over $400 billion a year that is spent on contingent labor in the US, starting to move to this freelance economy, as well as the arrival of fractional work, mostly from smaller companies that are doing it for the first time, suggests that this whole industry is going to expand and is going to get much bigger and much more important than it has been before.
So that's adding a lot of productive power to small companies if you can buy a fraction.
No question. No question. Hence the vibrancy of the startup world, how many startups there are, how many lean startups there are, how many entrepreneurs are venturing out, because for the first time, if you're an entrepreneur, you say, you know what, I can actually access all the people I may need much more easily than ever before.
And would you say that's an important part of the competitive advantage of America over some arbitrarily chosen country like, say, Italy?
You know, I think let's speak about Italy and go back to the theme of employability, which is, I think, maybe why I'm so biased. Some economies, some governments, some leaders have focused on protecting jobs as opposed to protecting employment. The two are completely different. In Italy, when you reach a certain age, your parents are proud to announce the fact that you have been sistemato, which means you're set. Meaning you found a job.
What's that, 75?
No. If you graduate from university and you're lucky enough to get a job in any job in Italy, you're set for life. Meaning that that's it. Your job is protected. You'll be there forever. That doesn't mean, though, that you're employable 10 years from now. It's very, very different. And if you can understand the distinction, then you understand why these economies are going downhill and why they're sunsetting in some ways, why Spain, Italy, Greece, Southern Europe is struggling so much.
You know, it's interesting. I often think about how Germany is holding up the European Union in so many ways. And there's, like we talk about American exceptionalism, I think there's German exceptionalism, because they've managed to figure out a lot of flexibility and enabling it, investing in infrastructure and having a vibrant business community. And I think that that's something that I think we should be looking at, because I totally agree with what Fabio was saying. We just lack imagination on our labor strategy. And it's something we should ask more of our leaders. I think it's pretty deplorable.
We have several dozen European bloggers. Just for the record.
Hi, I'm Diane Gearson. I'm responsible for HR at IBM. I think you've covered really well the employer perspective and the freelancer perspective, and now we're starting to talk about the third stakeholder, which is government. And I'd like to hear all of your perspective on things like payroll tax, things that pay for the things that this country depends on, this country in particular. How are we going to handle it? Where does this go from here?
Well, let me just say that when the companies that are using this model all want to do it the right way. So one of the key steps is to decide whether the freelancers that you hire are independent and 1099, or they are classified as potential employees, in which case they need to be payrolled. And our solution, Elance, does both. We go through a process of deciding for the client if the person is truly independent, if the person should be payrolled, and we provide both solutions, depending on the person's habits, the nature of the work. Are they working just for one client? Are they working for multiple clients? All of the proper classification process. By doing it this way, the government gets their taxes all the time. This is not an underground economy. This is not an economy that is avoiding taxes. It's quite the opposite, actually. And we find most of our clients want to do things the right way, including the Motley Fool and Mozilla and many of the big companies that we're working with.
Roger, the government.
I will say that as we were having our early discussions with Elance about partnering with them on this project, our finance department, our HR people, our legal department, we're all very nervous about, well, what about governance? What about taxes?
Compliance.
Compliance, sorry. And the answer kept being, well, that's for them. So eventually on the third or fourth meeting along these lines, I wrote on a sticky note, that's their problem. So our teams are now very happy that we can have these international relationships with our partners and know things that are being taken care of in the right way.
It's funny, when you said payroll tax, I, of course, thought how freelancers are paying double Social Security tax.
Yes.
And the interesting legislative history to that is that the legislators assumed that freelancers would cheat, and so they just arbitrarily came up at 50%. So, but ironically, Social Security is one of the only programs that actually really works for freelancers. It's completely portable. You pay in just like anybody else. Right. So it's actually very successful. But I think it really underscores how we need to really sort of look at that. And another example would be unemployment insurance. What if you could put away money in a pre-tax, tax-advantaged account that you could draw upon for appropriate reasons, and appropriate obviously being defined in the law? It would just make so much more sense. There's no way freelancers could go into an unemployment system. They would bankrupt it. It's just the truth. So what we really do need to think about is, if this is really growing and it's a third of the workforce, by the way, the BLS puts it, I don't know, at 6%. I think all of us would agree that's ludicrous. I think it's just a place for imagination. So I hope HR people, we can go and be creative and start changing this,
I do get the impression that the Department of Labor is run by these two old men with very, very long grey beards and very badly fitting dentures, whose first question is, what do you work in, industry or agriculture? I mean, it's very, very bizarre. They've got to try and move at least into the 20th century. Another question. So.
They should use freelancers.
Yeah, they should. They should. It's,
Hi, my name's Hamza. I'm from the Mountbatten Institute. My question is focusing along the strategy side of recruiting contractors. Are you seeing that the jobs that are being advertised are aimed at experienced individuals, or are you seeing there to be a shift focusing on the younger professionals wanting to be contractors?
All of the above. It is such a broad process. There are some skills that are perfect for students Think about someone who's going to Carnegie Mellon and is developing new competencies in computer science or data science, which is such a hot area. And it's so hard to find data scientists nowadays, people with statistical background, mathematical background, to analyze lots of data. Perfect job for students. Perfect job for PhD candidates. Perfect. So I would say that there is, depending on the skill, the strategy varies. What's common, at least in our world, is knowledge work. Virtually all of the freelancers that we deal with, in some fashion or another, have a very good area of expertise. They're specialists in their field. They choose a set of skills that they want to be known for. They build a reputation around those skills, and they market themselves and deliver those services as knowledge workers.
Could I ask Fabio a question? Do you notice a difference culturally between workers that are, let's say, or professionals who are coming out of, let's say, college and people who are over 45 in terms of their happiness being freelancers? And what's the nuance that you find, if any?
Can I just jump in real quick?
Please.
We had a blogger bonanza at our New York office last week, and a third of our guests were college-aged, a third were in the middle of their work life, and a third were on the verge of retiring or retiring. And they all had different reasons for doing it, but they all just felt a freedom and an excitement about doing this thing that they love and getting actual money for it. Yeah. So in answer to your question, all of the above.
Yeah, likewise. And to the question, do I see differences? I think there's commonalities around familiarity with technology. If you're not very comfortable with technology and communicating online, it can be really frustrating. So someone who grew up with an iPad or grew up with a computer versus a rotary phone may have a little bit of an advantage. But as long as you're caught up with that, the behaviors are very similar.
Here comes the microphone.
I'm just wondering, and I've been one of those entrepreneurs who has used Elance very successfully, but I'm wondering about the breadth of the jobs that lend themselves to the freelancers world. So we're talking about graphic designers and writers, but I'm just wondering, can you move up the food chain, and do you foresee in the future getting lawyers through an Elance system, for example, or other sort of trusted
CEOs.
advisors, or CEO, anything? So I'm just wondering, because it seems that there's always sort of the programmers and the obvious suspects who do freelancing work.
If I can, please. So we refer to it as the blog army, and we found out that they do more than just write. So we have a company-wide initiative now where if you have something that you'd like outsourced, then come to us. So we have one guy who is in Australia, and he needs some SEC documents from several years ago. They're not online. So we put that out for the Blarmy, see if anyone wants to go to the SEC and take pictures of them and email. On the other end, we're now we're reaching out to these people to go to annual meetings in your area and sit in, follow the Q&A, write a report about that, come up with we have a rating system, so we're going to develop a database of who has the best annual meetings in terms of food and transparency of the leadership. So for our purposes, the limits on what we can ask these people to do with us are essentially limitless.
I mean, we have 225,000 members nationally, and they range from real estate, finance, nannies, every kind of work. I think that's really the big change probably in the last few years is it's in every sector now. There's not a sector that doesn't have it. Manufacturing has a lot of freelancers who do a range of different kinds of work. It's just everywhere. It's no longer creative only. It's not young hipsters. Not wearing pajamas during the day, FYI.
One of the ways to think about the phenomenon is to look back at e-commerce when it started, Beanie Babies, collectibles, books.
Right.
And as people got more familiar and more people participated, it moved to cars and clothes and shoes even before trying your shoes, which was unthinkable before. And we're starting to see that. If you go to Elance today, you can actually find lawyers. We have a client in Washington, Elevation Burger, who's a very successful food chain. And he has built and it's a restaurant business, which by design is a local on-premise business. But he's built his entire professional network on Elance, and he hires lawyers, researchers, people that do real estate work for him on the system. So it's starting to happen.
This is the last question here.
So along those lines, I'm actually the founder of a company that has very senior level HR people who all do freelance work. So I'm a good case study for this example. I'm curious about the global trends, and are you seeing that here in the US versus globally, we're seeing more and more freelance work take place?
Shall I go for that? We're seeing people in underdeveloped countries or people with frail economies escaping their local economy. The term we use is escape your local economy, which, by the way, applies to people in many parts of the United States, Louisiana, for example. If you have a poor local economy and you have access to a computer, what can you do to put food on the table for your family? So we're seeing a lot of that. And it's clearly a global phenomenon in that respect. But many of the economies outside of the United States don't have the size of independent workforce that we have in the US. The independent workforce in the US is probably unique in terms of size and scale. And it's hard to tell. I cannot predict whether the same thing will happen in Europe, for example. I'm not sure. I don't know.
We do have a growing number of international contributors. We're launching some new sites around the world, and the blog network has been a feeder for those as well. And we recently got an email from a woman in Greece who's writing for us, and I'm not a crier, but it was pretty close. Just the way she was talking about the opportunities we had given her, and how it had basically changed her life and her extended family's life, because there's not a huge opportunity for employment in Greece right now. So if she can do great analysis about stocks and tell it in a compelling way and get $50 an article, that's going to be very powerful for her.
Sarah, you have 37 seconds to tell us about attitudes to the freelance economy outside the United States, starting from now.
You know, I would say what is really different is that in the US, Australia, England, a bunch of other countries, you see a very much more empowered, sort of out-of-the-closet freelance world. I think what we're seeing in other parts of the country is it's done through kind of temp agencies and large agencies. And so that's why we see that kind of distinction. And I think, you know, if I had my druthers, I really do prefer a freelance workforce in that I think that people have to be empowered to figure out what they want and to be able to put their lives together in the ways that they want. So if I had to pick, I feel like that's something we should be proud of here.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Fabio Rosati, Roger Friedman, and Sara Horowitz. Thank you.